What's happening, YouTube? It's Simon466cards, and today I have a wild one for you guys. We're going to talk about Beckett, but we're also going to talk about bribery and corruption. We're going to talk about a criminal conviction. We're going to talk about an appeal. It's going to go all over the place, but stick with me on this one. It's wild. Let's start at the very beginning. I just wanted to make a video about how to save the Beckett brand. That was the beginning of all of this. And that video is still coming and will be coming out in my next video. So if you are a new viewer and would like to watch that video, please feel free to subscribe to my channel. But before I could figure out how to save the Beckett brand, I had to figure out who or what owned Beckett. I've heard rumors that it's owned by this guy who's in jail. It's owned by this conglomerate. It's just a cash cow for some random company. And it turns out almost all of those things are true. And so shout out to both Teapot and Ryan from Gemrate for pointing me in the direction of who owns Beckett. And then after that, I started digging and digging and digging, and man, what a hole I went down. So let's start off with bare basics. Beckett Media. Who owns this company? Well, obviously James Beckett was the founder. Then in 2005, they sold to this company called Apprise Media, and then it was acquired by Eli Global in 2008, which was a company established by Greg Lindbergh. All right? Greg is going to be our friend for the next few minutes as we talk about what Greg's been doing over the last decade. All right? So here's Greg's Wikipedia page. Here's our new buddy Greg. He is roughly 53, 54 years old. And the first thing you'll notice is he is a former business executive and founder of Global Growth, which is this conglomerate. The problem is when you go to the third sentence, he was convicted of bribery and conspiracy to commit wire fraud and sentenced to 7 years and 3 months in prison. The conviction was overturned by an appeals court in June 2022, and a new trial was scheduled for March 2023. So right off the bat, this is getting wild. So let's see what our buddy Greg here, what he's been up to. So basically, he was dealing. He had this insurance company, and he was annoyed with the North Carolina Deputy Commissioner of Insurance, Jackie Obusek, because of lending limits placed on the assets of his insurance company. He was basically trying to consolidate a bunch of insurance companies together to create this like behemoth, right? But the commissioner didn't like that, so he went to the North Carolina Commissioner of Insurance, Mike Causey, who's this guy, and basically tried to bribe him. The problem is that this guy was like, I'm not doing that, and got the FBI involved and was wearing wiretaps, and eventually Lindbergh was found guilty of conspiracy to commit honest services wire fraud and bribery by a jury. And he was sentenced to 7 years. What does it say here? Yeah, 7 years in prison to be followed by 3 years probation and whatever. He reported to prison October 2020. And so you're thinking, the owner of Beckett, he's in jail, end of story. Well, you'd be wrong. Because he filed, or his attorney filed an appeal right shortly thereafter, and he was released from prison because there was some the court overturned his conviction because the judge did something wrong, yada yada yada. So you're like, okay, retrial scheduled to begin in November 2023. So he's back out, right? He's back out. Retrial. Well, what if I were to tell you, actually, the retrial already happened, it ended 2 weeks ago, and guess what? Convicted Greg Lindbergh in bribery scheme. By the way, I just want you to keep an eye on the pictures being used of our friend Greg here. Normal picture here, normal picture here. Just keep that in mind. So yeah, this trial ended 2 weeks ago, and he was convicted of bribery. And you can see for the second time here. And if you scroll down, if you're wondering like what's the penalty here? What's he waiting for? Well, it's up to 30 years in prison, right? So it's not just a little walk in the park. It's 30 years max. Now he's already served 2-ish years, right? He went to jail in September 2020. He was released in July of 2022, so he's already served 2 years, right? So I think he'll get some credit for time served. But he might be gone for a while. And that's just, for this case, a bribery, because our buddy Greg here, he's doing more than just a little bit of bribery. He, in, when is this? February 2023, also indicted on new federal charges of skimming money from his insurance companies. Because remember I said he owns this global, what's this company called? Global, what's it called? Global Growth, right? He owns Global Growth, but that's just a conglomerate of a bunch of many different companies. In fact, once you'll see it down a little bit, it's like 600 companies. And so you can see here that he was indicted on federal criminal charges, this time on accusations that he conspired to skim large amounts of money from his insurance companies, then lied about it to regulators to hide this scheme. And so that is completely different than the bribery charges. So he's going to serve more time for the bribery charges, but he's also getting indicted on skimming charges, right? So we've got two different sets of criminal charges being thrown against him. So if you're wondering why Beckett doesn't seem like it's gotten a lot of attention, I think we're starting to see why, right? And again, nice little picture of our friend Greg here. And so that's what's happening with the owner of the conglomerate that owns Beckett from a criminal perspective, from an is he going to be in jail perspective. What's his financial situation like, you might be asking, as all of this is unfolding, right? Greg's going to be pretty distracted right about now with all of these charges. Well, let's take a look. Notice the picture here. We've gone from this nice looking guy here, nice looking fellow, clean shaven, to what is going on here. What just happened? What, like, oh boy. So anyways, I mean, things went off the rails. He also became a health nut. It's a whole thing if you want to Google his name. But you'll see here that Greg is weighing his options after a North Carolina Court of Appeals cleared the way for his insurance companies to be liquidated, right? Sold off. And you're wondering, why could that be? Why are his insurance companies being liquidated? Well, do you remember this part about skimming money from his companies? Well, let's scroll down here. So you can see here, liquidation to be finalized. Lindbergh, founder of the private equity group Eli Global, eventually acquired several insurers and grouped them together as the Global Bankers Insurance Group. Regulators say Lindbergh used insurers to funnel money to his other businesses. So this is exactly what I said earlier, right? He created a conglomerate, grouped all the insurance companies together, and then it looks like he started taking some money off the top. So when Cowsey, and Cowsey is, I believe, this guy, the guy that wore a wire against him, when he filed for liquidation proceedings in 2022, one of the companies had assets of $253 million, liabilities of $345, and the other one had $1.37 billion in liabilities, or in assets, and $2.5 billion in liabilities. And so this is when things start going off the rails, because they're liquidating companies that this guy owns, right? And that's what I think will eventually happen to Beckett. And we'll get there, and I'll show you why in a little bit. But this is where we're at right now. Now, if you want more details on what they think happened, again, nice looking picture here. Like, Greg, what happened? What happened to you? Greg, what happened? Anyways, you can see here it's the same story here, but here's what he did. This is a little bit more detail about what Lindbergh did. Insurance profits soared and ultimately enabled Lindbergh to funnel $2 billion to Eli Global, according to a Wall Street Journal report. That attracted regulators like that Cowsey guy and initiated Lindbergh's downfall as insurers fell into insolvency. So that's why his companies are getting liquidated, because they fall into insolvency. Now, these individual companies are falling into insolvency. That's not saying the entire conglomerate is falling into insolvency, or not yet. And so let's go into the next and final case of Greg Lindbergh's financial empire crumbling. I think it might be the easiest way to say this. Oh my God, this picture, I can't get enough of it. Anyways, so there's a creditor out there who has been suing Lindbergh and basically saying he's been dissipating assets, basically taking money from his company so he doesn't have to pay this creditor. And so if you're wondering how much his creditor is owed, it's $600 million. That is $600 million. Let me repeat that. That's $600 million that Greg Lindbergh might owe to one of its creditors. Right? It's the creditors Ulico or Universal Life Insurance Company. Respondent Greg Lindbergh has been dissipating assets to evade Ulico's judgment. They have substantial reason to believe that dissipation is continuing. Moreover, Lindbergh's creditors increased, including a new recent federal tax line against Lindbergh in excess of $26 million. So he owes this company $600 million. He owes the feds $26 million in back taxes. And who knows what else is going to come out of the woodwork. But the more interesting part and how it relates to Beckett is when you scroll down. And let me find it here. All right, so I finally found it. Here it is. So you can see here, Ulico's federal court judgment against Lindbergh stood at $576 million on November 22nd, with interest accruing at almost $32,000 per day. Per day. Good Lord. So then it goes on to say that there's this charging order from a judge that affects 626 limited liability corporations. So under this conglomerate, there's over 600 companies, one of which, or maybe multiples of which, are under the Beckett umbrella. And so basically what this order is saying is that all the distributions from the companies, the 626 LLCs, those distributions, that money, those profits, should go to Ulico rather than Greg Lindbergh, because Greg Lindbergh owes Ulico $600 million, and it calls on Lindbergh to produce all governing documents and verified accounting linked to these companies with accounting and governance updates every 60 days. So basically, the court is telling Lindbergh, you owe this company a bunch of money, you're not paying any of it, so all the profits from your conglomerate and all the companies underneath that conglomerate need to just funnel those profits to Ulico. And so based on the fact that he has other businesses that have gone bankrupt basically and had to go into receivership and needed to be liquidated, and now there's another situation where another company, this Ulico, is owed a ton of money and has no real way to get them to pay. Couldn't you see a scenario where all 626 LLCs are liquidated to pay back Ulico because they're owed $600 million? And that's what I think will happen. And that's what I think will happen with all the companies, which include Beckett Media. And when you liquidate a company, you're operating from a position of weakness. You are not operating from a position of strength, because everybody knows that you need to sell the company, right? There's no negotiating power. You have no leverage. And you know who loves to buy a company when things aren't going well, when they have no leverage, when you really got them by the cojones and you can buy them on the cheap. And you know who's probably waiting in the wings, licking his chops, just getting ready to buy Beckett when they finally liquidate this company to pay back Ulico. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you Michael Rubin. He's ready. He's got the money. And you know when they liquidate Beckett, Michael Rubin is coming calling, right? And so up until this happens, though, based on the fact that all the profits from all of the LLCs that belong to Lindbergh, basically all the profits are being given to Ulico to pay back this $600 million debt. That means that no real investment, even if it's a good investment, no real substantial investments, whether in technology or processes or any of that stuff, is going to happen, because right now they want to reduce costs and just turn it into a cash cow for Ulico to pay them back all the $600 million that they're owed. They're not, so Beckett is just in a holding pattern until they get sold and liquidated because, like, let's face it, this guy is going to be in jail for a long, long time, and he's going to kind of hold on as much as he can, but ultimately he's going to have to sell off this conglomerate and just break it into pieces. And when that happens, it'll be like you'll cue Michael Rubin's music. He will come in guns a-blazing and buy them. Like, I don't think there's any other plausible theory as to what will happen when Beckett gets put up for sale if this all happens, right? But until that happens, and this could be 1, 2, 3 years down the road, because based off of what I've read on this Lindbergh guy, he really likes to drag his feet when things aren't going his way. This might take a while. And so I think the Beckett brand will continue to be in limbo, and it's just going to lose more and more of the cachet that the Beckett brand has. And I really feel bad for James Beckett, to be totally honest, because it's literally his name. But that's what's going to happen, I believe. It's just going to be just a holding pattern until the inevitable happens, which I believe to be Beckett gets liquidated and Fanatics and Rubin snaps them up. And I would be shocked if Michael Rubin or someone on Fanatics didn't already know all of this already. And that's what they're waiting for. Rather than paying top dollar now to buy Beckett, they're waiting for all this to unfold. They're waiting for Greg Lindbergh's empire to fall apart, and then they'll be coming by to swoop in and buy Beckett at like 10 cents on the dollar. And the other part of Beckett that's been problematic in terms of buying them is that there's all these other things besides the grading side, right? There's all these other offshoot companies. Well, if they have their own LLC, because remember there's 626 LLCs, if Beckett, like the events company or whatever it is they do, if that's different than the grading side, well then Michael Rubin can just come on by and just buy the piece that he cares about, which is just the grading company, I would assume, and ignore everything else if they're not under the same LLC umbrella. And like Michael Rubin's going to be laughing because he's going to pay probably like 10 to 20 cents on the dollar and not have to buy any of the businesses that he doesn't care about that are part of the Beckett Media brand, right? So that's the video where, we started off with how do we fix Beckett's brand to this guy turning into this guy. And then soon this guy will own Beckett. That's what I believe will happen. Who knows if it'll actually happen. Court cases are weird. This guy is clearly weird. Google him, go to his Wikipedia page. It's a wild ride. But that's the video. And like I said, next time I will be talking about actually how to save the Beckett brand, and I will incorporate some of what I've talked about here, but I will not go into as much detail because there's a lot more pragmatic things that Beckett can do to fix their brand, and those are the things that I'll focus on. But I'm definitely going to talk about the ownership piece as well. Anyways, I haven't heard anybody really talk about Beckett or like this whole fiasco that's happening, especially given that this has happened the last 3 months here. This thing happened Thursday, June 6th, so literally a few days ago. But so I thought I'd talk about it here. I honestly expected other people in the hobby media, the hobby news reporters, whoever it is that you want to think, who you think of when you think of that type of group, to have already been all over this, but they haven't. So I figured I'd talk about it and break it here. Would love to hear your comments. This has been a wild ride for me to find out about. It's definitely not expected when I started off with the question, how do we fix Beckett? What are we doing? And now here we are talking about bribery and 626 LLCs. Anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you as always for listening and watching. I'll talk to you all soon. Cheers.